Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Salam alaikum, 各位来宾, 下午好. We are absolutely delighted to be able to talk today on what is such a timely and important topic, the next stage in China's global commercial expansion. The Middle East was very important to the first stage in that expansion. The Middle East sells a lot of oil to China, buys a lot of consumer goods, and of course, Chinese companies are very active in the region's construction market. The Middle East will also be very important to the next phase in that expansion. What is that phase? Well, it's known as the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative was announced in 2013 by Chairman Xi Jinping. The Belt and Road Initiative covers 100 countries in Asia, Middle East, Africa, and Europe. It prioritizes 6 key trade corridors and emphasizes the importance of supply chains. It is a historic opportunity. And so we are grateful and honored to have such a high caliber panel with us today. We have represented 2 of China's largest banks, China's largest sovereign wealth fund, and a leading Chinese academic. So if I could introduce, starting from my left, Mr. Joseph Ho, General Manager of the Overseas Business Division at ICBC, Mr. Jiegen Wei, Senior Vice President at China Investment Corporation, Dr. Zhihuan, Chief Economist at the Bank of China, and Dr. Keyu, Professor at the London School of Economics. Thank you very much. I will be playing both the role of moderator today as well as participant, having worked in Asia and the Middle East the last 20 years on many of these projects. So, Dr. Jin, if I can throw the first question to you, and it's the million-dollar question, or should I say the trillion-dollar question, what is Belt and Road and why is it important to us?
So, I want to think about Belt and Road really ultimately as about connectivity. It is very much about physical connectivity, which would enhance trade across different regions, which would give enhance mobility of people and give people access to health and education, and also increase productivity. But as it is much about physical connectivity, it is also about customs connectivity, regulatory connectivity, and digital connectivity. So China is leading the efforts to bridge that connectivity in the world, and it is probably its debut performance on the global stage as a major leader in some major way. I think that we have interpreted, especially outside of China, China's efforts as a political move, a strive to make more influence. But I think that would really kind of detract the discourse from the economic implications it really represents. So, in essence, I think that China is really trying to provide a new model. It's a new global model that is not just about trade or about global capital flows, but it is providing a new global platform for international cooperation. Because when we talk about infrastructure, and shall I say that infrastructure is badly needed in this world, whether it is for developing countries or, dare I say, some very rich countries too, there has to be a leader, an enabler, to provide that platform, because on that platform we're talking about logistics, construction, we're talking about financing, operation, and different countries have different comparative advantage, and how do you bring the different countries' comparative advantage on the same platform? That's the new global model that China is striving to provide. Now, I want to make an analogy with the U.S. because U.S. did step on the global stage, post-war. It contributed greatly to the making of NATO. And without the participation of the U.S., that just wouldn't have taken place. And in some ways, global infrastructure, as much as it is needed, needs that big country leadership. But why China? And why does it need a global leadership? I want to think about productivity and infrastructure as a network. Okay, if you bear me 1 second to explain the economic underpinning, economic arguments underlying that, is that infrastructure and productivity is just, infrastructure becomes more productive the more connected you are. Now you can have this great port in Kenya, but if Angola cannot build the roads that lead to that port, the commodity and resources cannot be exported out of the country. So if we think about productivity as a network, and there are some critical nodes, some of these nodes might be smaller countries or developing countries. Who is going to connect those, who is going to help connect those nodes? And if not for some enabler, it just wouldn't happen. So if not China, then who is it going to be? Is it going to be America? Well, I think that America has some third world infrastructure in many of its places right now. And America is also actively disengaging from the global platform. And so China wants to be this enabler of this new global platform, and the emphasis is really on international cooperation. So I think we really have strayed away from the main discourse by emphasizing too much on the political issues. And also China has the advantage of absorbing a lot of risk, whether it's liquidity risk, whether it's risk on the time horizon, operational risk. We need a country that can act as a role. So it's more of a conductor of an orchestra, and it doesn't matter so much what nationality that conductor is, so long as the orchestra plays music.
And when we think about it in terms of China being a conductor, Joseph, are we talking short-term or long-term outlook?
Well, I think Belt and Road actually, is very strategic, I have to say. China is a lot more strategic in terms of all the movement that align the country, both tactically but long-term as well. I give you an example that, Belt and Road, everybody heard about that and know about that. It's not new, in terms of like the terminology, but we can see it differently at different time of situation. So if you can remember in the 1560s, China started with, the Africa, Asia and Southern America arrangement as well. So that is, of course, is not a replica of what the Belt and Road, but you can see that China is always very strategic, and everybody we always want to be strategic. But in terms of like execution, you can see that the Belt and Road strategy is not tactical. It aligned both, into today's, what the national strategy of, the 200-year dreams as well. So from that perspective, that Belt and Road is a facilitation of helping China to transform. So it is very strategic. And because of that, you can see on different stage, I really agree with Dr. Jiegen just mentioned about, China position. But, China never changed in terms of like, the direction. So from day one, when we, in the 50s, 60s, we have the, Africa, Southeast Asia, or Asia in general, and Latin American so-called strategy, to today's, Belt and Road strategy. But if you single out each period of time on all this strategy, it's very strategic.
Your point on strategy, I mean, it's very important. China has always had what's called a global policy, 走出去. Chinese companies have been very active in the Middle East, in part because of that, whether it's China State Engineering Construction, 中国建筑, Sino Hydro, 中国水电. These are companies that have all been very active in the Middle East prior to the announcement of the Belt and Road. And often one of the criticism, and I think incorrect criticisms foreigners do make about Belt and Road, is that it's a new policy. In many respects, as you've just argued, Joseph, it's an extension of an existing strategy, and that's what gives it real strength. And as Xi Jinping himself has said, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're simply, if we're going to do business together. We have to put the infrastructure in place to make sure that that business is much easier to execute on. Dr. I know you have very strong views on the long-term outlook, and particularly the role of some of the multilaterals, the UN and the World Bank. And I know one question often people want to ask is, but is this just China's strategy, or is it more of a global strategy?
I want to share with you 3 points. First, over the past 4 years, the Belt and Road had made great headway and is well now into the implementation stage. There is no doubt that the Belt and Road Initiative is a long-term commitment for China's opening up and building the new modern economic system, which will have a huge impact on the international economic system. So it's a big project. The second point is that more than 100 countries and international organizations have shown their support or participate in the project. And for example, the UN, the United Nations Assembly and the Security Council have incorporated both the content and the spirit of the initiative into the important resolutions, which means that the Belt and the Road will become a very important platform, just as said by Dr. Jin. And for the countries involved to build the communication and cooperation, coordinate their macro policies. And in the future, I can see that the countries along the Belt and the Road will play more and more important role in the global governance, including the economic, financial, and the social sector. So even the international monetary system, maybe we can do something new. The second point. The third point is that in all the Belt and the Road construction, the trade connect is very important. And during the past several years, the trade between the China and the countries along the Belt and the Road exceeded $4.2 billion US. And the strong momentum is still continue in the 2018.
Fabulous, thank you. And Dr. Wei, CIC has long had a presence in the region. I remember bringing some Egyptian investors or project sponsors to meet your colleagues in Beijing a few years back. They were shocked by the cold. I have to say it was freezing at the time. What is CIC's view on the region and in terms of the importance of Belt and Road?
I just come out with from the investor perspective. Actually, from the investor perspective, I highly welcomed this initiative and it was very supportive of the proposal. Not only because we share the same vision, but also it creates a lot of business opportunities for large investors like us. From the economic vision side, we think after the financial crisis, the major central banks pump abundant liquidity to the economic and financial system, but still the global growth has been sluggish and disappointing. Even though recent years we see some positive signs, but still, there's a downside risk to the global economy. But why this global economy is so sluggish? Dr. Jiegen just mentioned a few very important points: the infrastructure. And we need the infrastructure, even in the developed world like US. The deterioration of infrastructure and the access to the clean water in some of the areas is still emergency issues, but also in some developing countries. Take an example for China neighboring countries. There's a lot of skepticism on China about China rice. We think China rice should have a positive spillover effect to the world, especially to its neighboring countries. So how? Who will play the role? Who will channel the abundant liquidity from the financial market to the real economy? I think there's a government failure, a coordinated failure among the global communities to bring those money and the financial capital to the real economy. So this Belt and Road Initiative, why it's so popular in the international community? Because it's much rose the interests among different entities. So I think it may stimulate the global growth. On one hand, it may facilitate bridge the gap between the financial capital and the real economy, and also facilitate the integration of global economy, in a time when populism and protectionism in some countries become the major wars. In the investor world, now the money flow not to the real economy, not all at least. They are flowing into the financial asset. You see the high valuation of financial asset. For large investors like us, we find it's very challenging to meet our return target. So what should we do? So a lot of them have started to adjust their strategy. Some of them, try to increase their exposure to equities. Some of them try to make a lot of effort into a risky side of the investment, say direct investment, private equity, and a lot of alternative assets. It does not come out with no cost. When the volatility of the financial market rises, when if the cycle turns, the drawdown risk for the portfolio of this large investor becomes very large. So I think it's the Belt and Road Initiative. It opens a new area for large investors like us.
We have a lot of investors here in the room. I'd love to hear what they think. So we have an initial question for the room. If we could bring that up on screen. Right. Who is the Middle East's most important commercial partner? America, China, Europe, Japan, or other? Five seconds to go. I can't read from here too. That looks like, China. So we have very justified to be up here on stage. I'm quite impressed by those figures. I actually thought China would be number one. I didn't realize, though, that it would be nearly half of the room. And I think that is testimony to, in part, the importance that Belt and Road will play over the coming 10 years. So I do want to ask more specific questions about the Middle East. We have a room full of investors as well as business owners, and I'm sure many are asking, but what does it mean for me? How can I make money for my customers, for my partners, for my business as a result of this initiative? So if I throw some very quick sort of questions to you about the business implications. Joseph, I know you've been coming to the region 6 times a year for many years now to set up ICB's business here, an international platform. Why?
Well, I think, Middle East, especially UAE, has a lot of tie, together with China, both historical, but also culturally. So I give you a little analogy, in the Western world, things are very sharp edges, just like a cube, everything is so clear cut, okay? In China, it's a sphere. No one can look through, any corner. So are they different? Yes, they're different in the shape, but they're not different in the origin. Because in Chinese saying, we say that, 无规矩不成方圆. That means, they are done by the same tools, both a cube or a sphere. I'm not an expert in defining, what Arabic shape. Okay, I'm not that. But I'm quite sure in the Arabic world, UAE, you are not a cube, you are not a sphere neither. Okay, we need a platform, okay, that can integrate both the sphere together with the cube together. That makes sense, for the international trade as well.
Well, why the UAE? Why not Hong Kong? Why not London?
Well, I think this part of the world has a lot of things to do, because in particular, UAE has served 2 purposes in the Belt and Road. Number one is a passage. Secondly is a destination. The reason I'm saying that, because when China come out to do business internationally, sometimes you may not be able to go directly to a destination. So where do you go? You pick a choose, place. So there are locations that can be a parent company. Say, for example, Luxembourg is one, Singapore is one, Hong Kong is one, and BVI is one maybe. And then, there are Netherlands as well. Guess what? The double taxation treaty, you look at, the number of taxation treaties that are being signed by all this location. So the number one in the game is Netherlands, okay? Then, it come into Singapore is about 80, UAE and Luxembourg is around 70. Hong Kong is 40. So I'm not saying that Hong Kong is not good, but it's just different game. And I'm saying that this is a platform that probably is the best choice, for Chinese enterprise to lock in as a passage. But also because, there are about I can't remember the exact figures. The trade between this platform with Africa is around I think UAE is the 5th largest trading partners to Africa. So that is another part of area that China that need to be assessed to. And that's why I'm saying, this is the destination ideal, for the Belt and Road lock-on.
And Dr. I know Bank of China has been quite active here, whether it's RMB panda bond issuance or RMB denominated products. Keen to get your views on what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, I think the Middle East is located at a strategic position along the Belt and Road and maintain the close tie with China. I can give you 2 examples. The first one, last year, the Chinese oil company, we call it CNPC, purchased $2.8 billion, the 12% stake in Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, ADNOC, right? And
yes.
Marked the largest M&A project under the Belt and the Road Initiative. That's the first example. The second one, last month, the government of Emirate Sharjah issued 2 billion RMB yuan panda bond in the onshore interbank bond market in China. It's a first panda bond issuance from the Middle East. And I'm very glad to tell you that Bank of China is the lead underwriter in these transactions. And through branches in Dubai International Financial Center and Abu Dhabi, Bank of China Group is actively market player in promoting the Belt and Road Initiative and the RMB internationalization. Bank of China Abu Dhabi has been financing the domestic development project in UAE for more than $5 billion during the recent years, and with the special focus in petroleum, infrastructure, aircraft, and healthcare. The significant project includes Hussein Clean Coal Power Plant and the Dubai Airport Expansion Project. Last December, Bank of China has signed a MOU with Halifa Industry Zone and become the sole Chinese bank partner for the UAE and the China Industrial Capacity Corporation Construction Management Company. And the Bank of China Group will continue to work together with AIIB, CIC, also the FAB, to in the Belt and Road construction by providing all sorts of banking services to the UAE and the GCC members.
There's some fabulous examples here, and it's often overlooked that really the Middle East is China's gateway to the neighboring region, whether that's South Asia or Africa. We track 1,000 linked China projects across Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And it's quite striking. There's a large concentration, of course, in Cambodia and Laos, but also Bangladesh, Pakistan, Ethiopia, and Kenya. Now, these two latter markets, they're much more much easier to serve out of the Middle East. And it's no surprise that certainly in my conversations with Chinese multinationals here, they are using the UAE as a regional headquarters. And we're starting to see developments here that support that process. We heard that yesterday. His Excellency Khaldun al-Mubarak, CEO of Mubadala, made reference to that when he spoke about EGA, Emirates Global Aluminium, the integration of two major corporations to create what is a real global competitor. Much the same for Mr. Abdel Hamid Saeed, CEO of First Abu Dhabi Bank. Again, the integration of two large operations to create a real global competitor. And I've worked with Fab in Hong Kong and Singapore, genuinely global. These types of global companies just act as an anchor, as an attraction from Chinese multinationals wanting to work not just in the Middle East, but also to look for partners who understand the neighboring markets, whether that's Bangladesh, Pakistan, Ethiopia, and Kenya, and being able to operate with that deep local insight. I'm keen, Keyu, I know you've have some views on this, particularly around the green energy sector, but what's the importance of the Middle East to China?
As I mentioned, even though this is about infrastructure, there's a range of capabilities and kind of expertise that is needed for this platform. And I just want to highlight the importance of financial services and services in general, which China, of course, is contemplating on building the kind of right financial infrastructure, the kind of financial services to deal with the kind of risks that long-term and large-scale infrastructure involves. So I think along those lines, is a potential role for the Middle East. But more importantly, as you highlighted, the Middle East sits at a very critical or pivotal geographical location that is the gateway to Africa, that connects Asia and Europe. And it is by, being engaged with this region that platform of trade and infrastructure can really be enlarged. And of course, China is also very active in Africa, even though that's not technically part of the Belt Road, but infrastructure, construction activities in Africa is very much part of China's focus. So I think there are many ways in which, because of the special geographical position, special, kind of environment for financial services, and also, as you mentioned, as China can partner with the Gulf countries on the transition to low carbon environment and promoting the kind of green investment concept. I think there are many ways of cooperation.
And that cooperation is really important. Dr. Wei, I know CIC has sort of strong views around local partners and investing into emerging markets. What role could the Middle East play over the long term to assist CIC and its activities in this part of the world?
I see this region is very dynamic. The government has a very strong determination to diversify the economy away from the oil and energy. So they try to, put a lot of effort in financial service industry, like advanced manufacturing and, petrochemical kind of more value-added products, and also this, endowment in this area. For example, the young population in this area, it needs a lot of infrastructure and a lot of, resources capacity. And China, of course, has a lot of this kind of resources. Over the last 30 years, we accumulate a lot of skills, human resources, and also a lot of capacity. So the problem is that for the two economies to cooperate each other, we should find the comparative advantage and exchange it. So CIC can be the hub of this. We have like a lot of, we are sovereign wealth fund in China. We know better, we know China better, much more better than other peers, sovereign wealth funds. So we know Chinese economy, we know China's industry leaders, we know what their goals and their needs. And at the same time, we have a lot of global networks. Our portfolio is global. We have invested a lot of PE firms, and through those networks, of course, CIC can form as a connector for Chinese companies to the world, and also the global partners to China. So in this area in particular, I think, because it's very difficult to mobilize the different people together. So as Mr. He just mentioned, it's very important to build a platform for people to exchange message, to build the trust, and also to find the right partners. In the past, if you want to invest in emerging market or developing country, you have a lot of difficulties, regulatory hurdles, governance issues, making local people to understand your aim, and also a lot of currency risk, a lot of risks. Those risks cannot be solved by sole financial investors. It has to be solved by, governments and business community together, even intergovernment efforts.
That role of collaboration is really important. So I'm going to throw that to the audience and get their views on what you've just said. Can I bring up the second question? How important is the Belt and Road Initiative for the UAE? Not important, slightly important, very important, or not yet sure? Very important. Again, that's what I like to hear. Very encouraging. You've done your job. You're beginning to convince people on the importance of this strategy, and I would entirely agree. If I can shift tact a little bit, I do want to talk for a moment about the financial sector in particular. Dr. I think RMB internationalization, reserve diversification, obviously the financial sector will play an important role for the Belt and Road.
I think the Belt and the Road have accelerated international capital flow into the countries along the Belt and the Road. And China's outbound direct investment was the second largest one among the single countries. In 2015 to 2016, China's ODI in the countries along the BNR reached $130 billion, accounting for 9% of China's total ODI. In 2017, China's ODI in the Belt and the Road accounting for 12% of the total total investment. We can focus by 2030. The China's ODI in Belt and Road will reach $300 billion, more than double the current level. And there will be a lot of transactions related to the capital flow into the Belt and Road. And I think many transactions will be conducted in RMB. Since RMB internationalization is speeding up recently. Now, during the past 10 years, RMB's internationalization featured both the policy-driven and the market demand. And in the market side, now we have the Hong Kong Shanghai Connect, Stock Connect, and the Hong Kong Shenzhen Stock Connect, and the Hong Kong Shanghai Gold Connect. And now last year we have the Bond Connect. And all these Connect products will provide our clients more products, RMB assets and RMB investment tools.
And can I ask, I'm just aware of the time, the Belt and Road is $1 trillion opportunity, at least that's what some commentators expect. Who's going to fund it? Dr. Jiegen, I know you sit on a working committee for the China Banking Regulatory Commission, and you get involved in these conversations. Is this just an opportunity for China, or are foreign financial institutions able to get involved?
I think the biggest misconception is that this project is about China and it's China dominated. And it's interesting that some of these major investment banks, we're talking about banks that have a lot of information, would kind of be resistant to taking up some of these, these kind of roles, because they think they don't want to offend China by stealing away some of these opportunities. And that would be just a complete confusion about what this is really about. And On many other things, including the operational side, finance is one of the major ways in which international cooperation is going to happen. We're in a very low interest rate environment, so fiscal policy is particularly effective and needed. That's number one. Number two is I think we need to be a little bit creative in the ways we think about financial services that is related to the Belt Road or infrastructure initiative. One is, just throwing out a very, very provocative idea. Should we have a new asset class that is, solely devoted to infrastructure? Now, it was only not too long ago that emerging markets, as an asset class was completely novel and new. And now it's, become a very important asset class. And so I think we got to think about really creative ways to pool capital, to kind of, tranche different kind of, segments of risk. I think risk is a very critical element that everybody, including especially China, needs to think about. And we got to think about new ways of building new kind of the financial infrastructure suitable for really global infrastructure if it were to become a major activity for global cooperation. So yes, certainly there is, many, many different kind of roles different countries can play.
Well, Joseph, please, yes.
Dr. Jin just mentioned the innovation, the way of innovation of finance. And I think the core essence of Belt Road Initiative is inclusive. Consulting together, building up together, and sharing the benefits together. Of course, the financing has to be innovative. I think, probably it shouldn't be China alone. You should bring all the interest parties together. Say, like we build up like bilateral or multilateral funds, or like specific industrial funds to bring the capital together, GP together, and bring the interest, the third-party money together along the Belt Road economic zone, so that the economic engagement, the financial engagement, and the economic engagement are more tied together, so that the win-win situation will be much more proved.
Joseph, we have a room here. Potentially, there are project sponsors here, and I know I certainly take calls from sponsors asking, how do we approach a Chinese bank? How do we tap into some of these Belt and Road funds to fund our infrastructure project? What's your advice?
Okay, so first of all, I think when I just started to talk about strategy and all that, because Belt and Road is really a strategy of the country. It's not about anything, only numbers and all that. It's more a very big picture arrangement. So the number one thing I think, we need to align with that kind of thought. If you want to come in like a haphazard way of doing things, probably though that is not the flavor of Chinese, economy right now. And that's why, even like ICBC, we try in the last few years, last 10 years, to build a network across the world that we have 40, odd countries, coverage right now. The whole reason behind that is because we want to support that, not only the Belt and Road strategy, but also the internationalization of the Chinese bank as well. So that's why, we need to facilitate that. And from an investor point of view, number one thing, the most important thing is the kind of investment, does that align with the Belt and Road strategy? That means, does it align with the country's strategy as a whole? And that is the primary question. If you want to get funding, you want to get, the good advice, the collaboration from the Chinese government or even the bank, that is the question that you need to focus on. And you need to find the right linkage between your project and that strategy. And that is the most important part. And we're such a big bank that we have all the connection, we have all the locations that we can work together to make arrangement and to make sense, to your business as well.
Fantastic. I want to turn to the audience for a last time. We have a third question. Specific to the financial sector. What is the most exciting Belt and Road related financial opportunity? 10 seconds. Project finance, fabulous. So I'd encourage everyone in the room here to go and talk to FAB's project finance team. I'm sure they have something to say here on this subject. Okay, I want to move now. We only have 5 minutes left, so I want to move into a fourth topic, and this is a more challenging topic. China is not the only player in the Belt and Road region. There are other strategic powers, whether that's Korea, Japan, America, or Europe. Dr. Jin, the tough one, tough question. What is the risks the Belt and Road results in conflict?
No, I think this is actually one of the key risk factors behind the Belt Road Initiative. Now, as much as in my opening remarks I tried to emphasize on the economic implications of these projects, I think the challenge, one major challenge, is political. And it is this political relationship with the recipient countries. But really underlying that political relationship is the political relationship between China and the US in particular. Now, let me give you a small anecdote about Sri Lanka, which is, a developing country that desperately needs Chinese investment when it comes especially to infrastructure. And because of various political parties now using the China card as kind of, the China as a card to win elections by either siding or not siding with China, what happens is that, one political party decided to side with the US and India, having been promised the kind of investment to Sri Lanka that China had also. And of course, we knew what happened, which is that the money never came. And then they decided to go back to China and say, well, actually, we would like to realign ourselves with you. And, China's like, not so fast, but I think China understands that, political umbrella and tries to iron out some of these differences. But I think that the key challenge is that despite these economic projects which the recipient countries need, they are met with a lot of political resistance along the Belt Road. And I think I just want to say that we want to think about a new, what is that kind of global leadership that China is really trying to provide? I would say that America, in the post-war era, tried to export some of this moral universalism, the values. China doesn't necessarily believe that there is such a thing as universal values. It doesn't necessarily want to interfere political with other countries. It just has an entirely different philosophy of what that global leadership looks like. And so the emphasis should be more about shared economic benefits. I think that we do not have enough of that, especially with rising protectionism, but we also should realize that it's not just through trade integration and capital flows that global cooperation can be manifested. It's that shared economic benefit that really China is trying to push. But unfortunately, that has been misunderstood vastly and too frequently. So I think one of the key issues is ultimately political, but also in terms of implementation. I also actually like to throw a question to you, Ben, if I may, and the rest of the panel who are actually on the working specifically about these projects, is that my sense, having been working with the banking CBRC and other participants, is that there is still a lack of coordination, and people are searching, and entities and companies in different countries are searching for opportunities, not really knowing where to go. Where I sit in Britain, they're also saying, so how can we actually participate? It doesn't seem like there's a very clear kind of pathway or efficient track to achieve that global cooperation.
No, absolutely, and I think that's why collaboration is so important. And there is a potential for conflict, but clearly Chinese companies are increasingly collaborating. It's a comment we hear from foreign multinational clients, GE with Sinomac in Africa, Samsung with China State Engineering here just in the UAE. So collaboration has become increasingly important. And thinking as a business owner, I can't help but look at the Middle East and say, one of the great opportunities is in India. Chinese Belt and Road projects in India are very limited in number and primarily for political reasons. Chinese port operators are unable to make investments in India. But India is one of the great opportunities for Belt and Road. It's a big economy. And you can see a role here for Middle East companies who have significant experience in India to act as partners to work alongside Chinese operators and to help them to win projects, to manage projects in India and to reduce some of that tension. So I, even as a business owner, I have to come back to that point on collaboration and say, it's fundamentally so important. Now, I appreciate we're out of time, so I first want to thank first Abu Dhabi Bank for the invitation from all of us to be able to speak on, again, what is such an important topic. And of course, many thanks to, again, such a high caliber panel. Very grateful for all your insights. Thank you, everyone.